Hello everyone, and welcome to Halo 3. And this is a video I've wanted to do for a really long time. Actually, ever since that creepy feeling, what is it with Source games? Oh, that was way back, but the reason is because in that video, I said that while in that moment I was dissecting that feeling of uneasiness and not being alone that so many people seem to feel on empty source maps, it's actually something that can happen with any game. And when I said that, Halo 3 was the one I was thinking of. Now, the interesting thing about exploring Halo 3 is that I'm actually able to approach this from several different perspectives. On the one hand, you have the obvious side of returning to all these nostalgic spaces where I spent so much time as a kid, places of action and explosions and gun battles, now left totally silent and lonely. But the thing is, I'd be lying if I said that was the only thing, because I think even back in the day, I still felt a little bit unnerved by these places. And actually, I'm choosing to start this in what might have been the very first time I felt that feeling. Right here, on Guardian. See, I was 12 when I got this game, and I had just gotten set up with Xbox Live. I was super excited. And my only real previous experience with online shooters was the original Call of Duty on PC. And so playing this, jumping from that to Halo 3, blew my mind just completely. Not only through the gameplay itself, but through the map design, through the gorgeous graphics, all the things that were going on, all the different weapons, grenades, the way the map actually influenced the gameplay so much. Things like grav lifts and power-ups, we can take this and go invisible. Oh, it was absolutely incredible to me. This was the first map I loaded into, and I was absolutely getting creamed, but it was really, really fun to play. And I found out through a friend who already had the game, you can actually load these maps up yourself outside of multiplayer. And I thought, oh, that is so cool. I would love to walk around. And I figured that by walking around, I could give myself an advantage by learning the layout of the map. And it was when I tried that I think I first experienced that feeling of not being alone. And I think it's because, well, let's have a look at this. Let's have a listen for a moment. Listen to those distant moans of something out there. If we look in the distance, we can actually see these, alien creatures flying around. You get a sense for the scale of the environment you're in when you can actually look around at it. And I think it wasn't just being suddenly alone, suddenly without the sounds of player activity that did it for me. It was suddenly noticing all the things that I hadn't before. And honestly, I think on some level, it made me sort of wonder what else I might have missed. Because I do feel like you never truly know a map until you've been there alone. When you're playing an actual game, especially a competitive game, you just never take a moment to look around at what's actually happening around you. Now, Halo 3 may have been my introduction to these games. However, I know for a fact that people felt it even before this, because of the legendary Ghost of Lockout. Now, this was a story that I had heard about, and I know there was a video circulating online. Now, let me briefly explain what that is. So, on the Halo 2 map, Lockout, there was a claim, and even a video, purporting to show what would occasionally happen, which is that a mysterious player, I think maybe with no name, would join the game and start just gliding all over the place at impossible speeds, facing only one direction, and no matter which way they were facing, if it was in line of sight of a player, it would chuck a sticky grenade, which would home directly in on the player, and always get them with perfect accuracy. This player couldn't be killed, couldn't be evaded. It was just, it was super weird. And that's the kind of thing I would attribute to just early game like Urban Legend of Zelda. But there is that video. And now later on, the same thing, I believe, in fact, I think this was my introduction to that story, would later take place on this map, with a video showing a very similar thing, only with a player that was completely gold with armor. Now that really freaked out 12-year-old me, especially since I already had this experience that I thought I was alone in, of walking around on this map and feeling watched. And look, I've played the Master Chief Collection since it came out. I spent a lot of time in Reach, but I haven't really revisited Halo 3 too much except to replay the campaign. So right now, this is like a trip down memory lane. Even though I'm playing it in like 4K 120 FPS right now, honestly, this is exactly how I remember it looking and feeling. I think Halo 3 was the first game that actually got me to think about levels or maps from a design perspective. It was super interesting to me to think about how all these things like deliberately connect, how there's all these different ways to access different areas in order to outsmart other players. And Guardian has a lot of that. You can see all these different areas where we can jump, take grav lifts, be launched across the map, hide. But this being a small map, I think that's about all I have to say about this one. So let's move to something bigger, shall we? And the next one, fittingly enough, was actually the second game I joined. Sand Trap. And if playing Slayer on Guardian caused me to blow my mind, this map about caused me to spontaneously combust. I mean, look at this. Vehicles in multiplayer? Not only vehicles, but crewed vehicles? Vehicles that, in order to be effective, would have to be crewed by multiple players? Oh, but that's not even the half of it. This is when I decided that this was going to be my favorite game for a few years. Look at this. Mobile base. Mobile base that multiple players, tons of players, the entire team can be walking around on. A little ramp so you can drive a vehicle up onto it. Turrets on every side. And you can drive the thing itself around the map. I had never seen anything like this before in any game, and honestly, I don't know if there's really been much like this since. This was like pirate ship battles, especially when the other team would get in their elephant, drive them close to each other. This is bringing me right back there, how much absolute fun it was. And the thing was slow as anything, but if anything, that just made for more fun situations as you tried to ward off players trying to board you. Using this thing as basically a ladder to climb up onto these and make that a larger base. But being a bigger map, it did also have much more potential to spook me a little bit, especially when I realized that this game actually has quite an incentive to come onto maps alone in the form of Forge mode. In addition to all the crazy gameplay, I learned, actually from watching clips on G4, God rest its soul, that it actually had an in-game level editor. See, back in my day, games, and especially console games, were so much more limited. And so having the ability to actually create and save and share my own maps, the ability to fly around without limits, that was really, really crazy to me. And really novel. But I will say, I spent so much time on that, the eerie feeling from being alone only got worse, especially on these huge maps. Especially since, well, I don't know if anybody else experienced this or if there's a reason for it, but I always thought when I was forging, every once in a while, just occasionally, I would hear like the distant sound of a grenade going off. And maybe it's just because it was something I was used to hearing in, like, regular multiplayer games, but I don't know, especially on these in particular, I would sometimes swear I heard something. Let's have a moment, actually, if we chuck one off into the distance to hear what that would sound like. Yeah, that. Just that faintest explosion. Hey, I've just realized something. when we look at the ground, we can actually see the wind blowing a layer of sand along the surface. I really do have to wonder if that was there in the original, or if that's not something that was added for the Master Chief Collection. I remember I was always really unnerved by this little area underneath this base. You would almost never come here in multiplayer, and in Forge, I always felt like I would round a dark corner and see a player just step out of sight. Sometimes when I was forging, in my paranoia, I would think I would turn around and see somebody standing in one of these entrances, and then walk back in, daring me to go after them. That's the thing about loneliness. I feel like it's about the stories you tell yourself. Not, I think I saw that happen, but what if that happened? That's something I've started to think about more and more, is that I honestly think that tendency to let your mind wander is the difference between people who get scared in these situations and people who don't. But that's about all there is for this map. Let's go on to the next one. I think Foundry has to be the most popular map in the game, but not as you see it here. It was actually pretty rare for this map in its default configuration to be voted on in matchmaking. No, the reason this is so popular is because it was the source of almost every Forge map. And the reason for that is because arriving, I think like a year almost, or maybe a few months after release, this was the first map actually aimed at accommodating Forge. Now why is that? Well, you'll notice that all of this map geometry, or at least a lot of it, is actually Forge objects. You could have a lot of fun with this map. Now the annoying thing about this is, and I can see they haven't changed it for the Master Chief Collection, Halo 3 was the very first iteration of Forge mode, and it was very janky. See, you would think there would be like 90-degree snapping or the ability to place objects in the air. Not so. Even though these things are meant to be building blocks, they all have physics, and they are all just treated as props. And so, putting actual maps together, using these walls, using these blocks, was a painstaking process. I remember there were all kinds of roundabout tricks mapmakers would use to try and get things to work correctly. So for example, if I wanted this box, say, to be like floating in the air over the map, I would actually have to hold it here, hold it exactly where I want it, and then save the game while still holding it, exit, and reload and come back. And if you wanted to build like a multi-part platform, you would have to do that for every single piece. I remember spending forever trying to get walls to line up correctly. There was a trick you could do where you could use... Well, there was a setting where you could delay the spawn of objects to like 30 seconds a minute in, and you would use that to merge objects, and then turn off the timer, or something like that. The thing is, when you put that kind of ingenuity in the hands of players, it leads to them discovering a lot of cool things. I remember there were all kinds of bugs that, like, a lot of maps exploited, and Bungie never really made much of an effort to fix those things, which I think is actually really, really cool. Okay, so how do I actually rotate this thing? So let's try bringing this over here. This is actually a little bit more awkward on PC than it was on console. And it was pretty awkward on console. Let's see if this bug still works, this one in particular. This is something that had a lot of applications in a lot of different maps. It looks like they actually added a lot of different options for the Master Chief Collection. Because I don't believe you could get anti-air wraiths in Forge. I think this was actually one of the most requested features when the game was a thing. Okay, that's you right there, and if we can get on it, what you would do is get on, look all the way up, and then get off. Oh, but I think I remember testing this when the MCC released Forge, and I think they fixed it, which is sad. You could actually use this to get out of the map on a lot of places, or inside objects. Thing is, because of the wide open and creative nature of Foundry, most maps would actually take place in that large area over there. since that's basically your canvas to work in, which meant that usually these back hallways would be sealed off. In fact, there's even props specifically for doing so. And so whenever something did take place back here, I don't know, it was always a little weird. This always kind of felt like that out-of-bounds, in-bounds area, you know? Just because you so frequently weren't able to come here. Now, most of the time, when you played on Foundry, it actually looked something a little bit more like this. According to the file share, this was last edited by me, October 8th, 2008. I built this map to play lots of players close-range shotguns with my friends, and it actually was kind of fun. Now honestly, I have no idea what happened. I'm pretty sure I had some other maps downloaded, such as Jenga and McDonald's. Oh, remember those classics? But for some reason, they don't seem to be here now. For some reason, now I only have what was left in my file share, which was this and some Halo Reach map. I remember maps like McDonald's and pretending to take friends' orders. I remember maps like the recreation of Robert Neville's house, which was, like, insane. I even remember somebody made a movie on YouTube where they put it up in, like, 13 parts, and it was just 10 minutes at a time, the audio of the movie set to a recreation in-game. Such a different time in gaming and on the internet. But actually, I wonder if there's not maybe some kind of way to download other maps now in the MCC. Oh my god. I was just scrolling through trying to see if there's not some, like, catalog to download other maps and such. And I just realized ICANN has Recon. Okay, well, that was far easier than I ever imagined it would be. Okay, middle school dream fulfilled. This map sucked. Isolation. Pretty much everybody hated it from what I remember, and so did I. I think it's because you have this whole surface area that is pretty much a death sentence if you try to go up here, so there's, like, no reason to be in, like, most of the map. And then the rest of it was basically just these tunnels with, like, no cover, nowhere to hide. It just wasn't very conducive to Halo gameplay, I feel like. Still, I will say that even in the actual multiplayer games, I would be a little bit freaked out by this thing. It's the flood contamination down in these tunnels that just made it feel like there was something evil about this map. I think it was partly because of how non-conducive to gameplay and hostile it all felt. The way the whole thing is penned in, you can see the parasite just climbing up the walls slowly. It felt like you were contained in here with something, and that at any moment you would be, I don't know, like it would try to make contact with you or something. Like when you were down here, you'd start to hear a voice in your head. Alright, let's drop down through the map's butthole, which is a thing. And this is usually where you die. That's the thing, that was such like a desperation move to jump down there, because you were probably getting shot at by every angle, and then you would jump down here and continue getting shot at from every angle. The only place you could actually be somewhat safe is in these little rooms, which I was always really confused about how to enter. Oh, I see, you can enter on the sides here. But once again, coming in here was basically a death sentence because you were just going to get grenaded to death by people on the sides. So, as you can see, there's just really no good place to be. I actually remember, though, this was the map where I got that really, really annoying achievement for running somebody over with a mongoose in a ranked game. Or I think it had to be in a ranked game. Anyway, on to the next. Listen to those ambient noises. Epitaph is a map that's been really spooky to me ever since the first time I played it. I mean, look at that absolute vertigo. And what even is that thing? This whole place feels like some kind of religious site, and I always felt watched by that hologram thing in the middle. But that's not the worst thing about this place. The worst thing about this place is this. This huge structure just standing all alone in the middle of a vast desert. The bright sun cast over its sands, but with what looks like a dark storm approaching. Imagine taking shelter from that in here. Not only that, but something I only noticed now trying to record this, I'll show the footage from a minute ago, and probably subconsciously noticed while I played. Just every once in a while, you'll be able to hear the singing of a ghostly choir echoing off the walls. Like there's some kind of congregation somewhere in the building, in a hidden chamber that, to achieve that kind of echo, must be just as cavernous as this one. And it's also, I think, just the size of this thing. I mean, everywhere you look, it's either 1,000,000 miles down or 1,000,000 miles up. You feel so small in this place, and it's the kind of thing where a screenshot wouldn't do it justice. You have to be in here to appreciate just how huge this all is. Alright, I forgot about the grav lift on this side. Let's launch ourselves upward. Ooh, I forgot you could even climb over here and hide away, drop down below. See, that's the thing, is that it's not a creepy looking map on its face. At least not, like, in the traditional sense. But the ambiance just makes it feel like there's something sinister about it. And couple that with being stared down by whatever inhuman monstrosity that is, well, there you have it. Last Resort was also one of my favorites when it came to examining game design, because it was really cool how this map, effectively, through its geometry, forms different islands and an ocean in between. So basically you have all these places like this, these catwalks and different buildings where you can survive, while usually there would be a warthog and a ghost circling around down below. It had different changing aspects of the map so that you could access this from over here, being able to use this to make an escape or get the drop on someone. Really, really cool, but as usual, on an open map like this, it's really hard not to feel like there's someone else here with you. Now in this case, it's not really any different from any other map in that regard, and it's not really worth me giving that same speech for every single map in the game. However, this map does have a couple of unique features that I feel are worth calling attention to. And this is something that, once again, it's not just the nostalgia factor of revisiting a place. I really did feel like this at the time. First of all, these back hallways, which, people rarely actually used, especially the one at the end over here. When you have these, little unexplored side areas that are normally neglected in the course of actual gameplay, it just feels wrong when you visit them. It actually almost reminds me of the pool areas in the back of Block in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. It was so long before I even recognized that stuff was there. And so it's really creepy to know that, well, while you're playing, there could be someone just chilling there in the background of the memories you're making with your friends, and you wouldn't even know it. I think that's actually at the heart of a lot of video game creepypastas. The idea that your memories, your fun times, are being intruded on by some unseen third party. But also, I always got kind of a strange and almost sad feeling from this beach. It served as a spawn point for one team. It would be a place where you gear up, get in your vehicles, and drive towards the map proper. But it always seemed like such a huge, neglected area where not a whole lot of actual combat would take place. And so, between that and being a beach, this area all hidden off to the side by that wall, it always felt like an area that was serene and empty even during the course of a regular game. Sometimes I would just, like, come over here and, like, stare out to sea, probably immensely pissing off my teammates, but still, I don't know, it just kind of has that Destiny Islands feel, doesn't it? Like, maybe where Spartans go when they die. I wonder if we can splazer the birds. Oh my god, I think we can! Oh, Bungie, bravo! Oh. It's this thing. For a moment I thought it was like some kind of hiss coming from behind me. Yeah, phone offline. I've never seen this before, but it's just one more detail to add to the sense of isolation. Look at this, a lone station in the dead of night in the middle of Arctic waters. I actually honestly do feel like they were trying to make this one a little bit more on the spooky side, because this map, Blackout, is actually a remake of the Halo 2 map, Lockout, where people claim to see the infamous ghost. Because it didn't take long, of course, for people to start circulating stories that the same thing was happening here. Now, personally, I actually don't find the map itself to be all that creepy, mainly because, well, the Halo 2 one is a whole lot creepier. Like, I know it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video to go look at a Halo 2 map, but I really do feel like I can't talk about this one without the context of showing where it came from. So here we are on Lockout, and even though it takes place during the day, I still feel like this one is quite a bit creepier. Partly because the still night has been replaced with a snowstorm, and also because, well, in my opinion, having more detail on Blackout actually makes it seem less spooky. I turned around and honestly thought there was somebody standing there for a second. But what I was going to say is that, like, I feel like having all the extra detail and lights and all that stuff actually makes it feel less, I don't know, like a memory. I feel like these graphics help to put me in the mindset of the time. The time when people weren't just data mining to figure out everything that was in a game. If they were, you might not even come across that information, because everything was more to these tight-knit, like, forum communities. And really, anything was possible. You'd have no idea if the game really was haunted, if it was a story some people made up, if it was something the developers put in the game. Even this hallway is quite a bit creepier in this version, which I did not expect. Even implying that something may have perhaps escaped. I think that's a big part of the appeal of so many creepypastas taking place within older games. Because it's not only something that feels more distant and mysterious, and yet still something that was a part of your life, thus giving it all the attributes of one of your own hazy memories. But also, it puts you back to a time when you might have believed something like this could be true. I'll just show a little bit of the clip that's on YouTube, because imagine you're a kid in the 2000s, and you come across this video online. It might even be from before YouTube was a thing. Things used to be a lot more scattered and less centralized on the internet, and so to come across this, like, to an impressionable mind, that would cast such a shadow over every time you play the game subsequently. It kind of reminds me of the times when I would play GTA 4 and be with friends combing the tunnels on motorcycles looking for the Rat Man. And, I'm experiencing this as an outsider. I wasn't in the community when it's got jump scared by the fusion coil that I pushed down. That's how into this I'm getting. Because I wasn't part of this community when these stories would have been popular. And yet, even talking about it, even seeing the visual style, it's able to put me right back there. And that's the thing, these stories are actually part of our memories of these games. It's not just a corruption of those memories, unless the creepypasta came later. If it's a story that existed at the time, it was part of our experience and thus part of our nostalgia. Ghost Town almost looks a little bit like the maps I would explore today in Gary's mod. But I think that's kind of why I found it a little bit weird at the time. Especially alone, of course. I mean, this is more of a crumbling, abandoned environment, where in normal maps, even the abandoned places are still futuristic and alien. Because of this, crumbling look, it's also quite a bit more detailed, and has so many, dark and shadowy little corners for people to hide in. I don't know, I feel like when you're walking around in the middle of this map, you always feel eyes on you from the shadows. A whole little room in the side here. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful map. But it also doesn't help that it was also a DLC. And, I mean, I may be alone in this, but I also feel like DLCs sort of have an intrinsic creepy factor to them all their own. Especially if you're already used to the game. Because what it is it takes something that you're familiar with and introduces something new. See, even though this only came out, a few months to, a year after the game came out, when you're a kid, that's a long time, and so it gives you plenty of time to get used to the game. And so to have something new that you don't really understand be brought into it, that was a little bit jarring for me, actually. I probably wouldn't experience it the same way now. But even at the time, I hated this little place. Especially if you ended up stuck down here during infection. At that point, it was pretty much just a matter of when they think to look for you. Memory is a really weird thing. Because coming in here, I have a very vivid memory of trying to get on a mongoose here and immediately getting stuck by somebody who jumped down from here and then driving out and exploding. And what's weird about that is that I'm only realizing now, it's sort of anchored in my mind as something that just happened. It feels like a recent memory, like something I came back to the game, played a match, and had it happen. Which very well might have been the case. It might have been something that happened after I stopped playing. But we're talking, at the latest, 2010 maybe. And so it's really weird for me to recall that simply from having taken place after my main body of experience with the game as something that just happened. Everyone, cold storage. And I always really appreciated how the developers would have these details like this on the map. Normally multiplayer maps, especially at the time, would be dedicated more to just pure geometry. But it actually encouraged you to look around in a way, and I feel like that became more so as more DLC packs came out. Now, this wasn't actually a paid DLC pack. I believe it was released for free as a thank you to the community. And I actually remember waiting up for it to release with my friend. See, as you start getting into these later maps that came out, I sort of start to associate them with memories that aren't even related to the game itself. I mean, I don't have a ton to say about this map. It's just that, I don't know, when I walk through here, I can, feel the sweat and the humidity of coming home early from finals in middle school and getting on to play. Look at this whole area outside of the glass. I remember doing the minigun trick to get out and walk around in there. I think you'd die pretty quickly. It's weird how a game, or certain aspects of a game, can sort of tether itself to an era of your life. Like I said, I sort of associate all of these maps that came out after a certain point with, like, moving into high school and having other things on my mind. Not really as nostalgic for them because, well, I didn't play them as much. But in a way, I've sort of formed a nostalgia for them being the ones I didn't play as much. In fact, some I don't think I played at all. Which leads me into the next maps. Welcome to Sandbox. And as you can tell from the fact that all this geometry is interactable, and the grid on the floor, this was intended, even as a late release, to basically be the ultimate Forge map. And I guess it's sort of delivered. Personally, I never really liked the aesthetic of it, and I didn't really care too much for the props it gave us to build with, as opposed to Foundry. But it certainly did give us a lot more freedom. I believe it actually came maybe pre-baked with a clean version. And not only that, it wasn't just this area. It actually gave map makers the ability, through teleports, to utilize up here as well. And so you could build your own map on this pre-made, pre-clean, gigantic slate. Now, if I go out of Forge mode, can you fall through this? Yes, and you'll fall to your death. However, I believe props will balance on top of that. And so, for the first time, without using exploits, you could actually build your own floating platforms without any trouble. Now, the unfortunate thing about this map is I believe it came a little late. By this point, the game was like 2 or 3 years old, and, you know, being a console game, and just the fact that back then, games weren't supported for as long. It wasn't the norm for games to release and then just be worked on forever. And so, by this point, I feel like the community was kind of waning a bit, and not a whole lot of people really gave this DLC a try. Or rather, I should say, a lot of people bought it, checked it out, said, this is cool, and then just kind of didn't really play the game as much. Or at least that's the position I was in. Because I remember being really, really hyped for this to come out, but by the time it did, you know, I was going into high school, I had other stuff going on, and I was really kind of on my way out of Halo 3 at that point, and I think a lot of people were too. In my opinion, that also makes it one of the creepiest maps in the game, if not the creepiest. See, to me, this sort of has the association of being that fabled thing that everyone always wanted, and yet was added to the game later. A non-nostalgic element to a super nostalgic game. Almost like a dream I might have about a game that I really enjoy, but would really like to see some feature added. And here it is. Not to mention the fact that this map is also just very creepy in general. It's got all the aesthetics of Sandtrap, this little space surrounded by these towers staring down at us. But now night is falling. There's a dark sky with the sun just barely peeking up from behind a mountain. And that's what makes you realize this light in the middle is not from the sun, but from these spotlights. And I'll tell you what else makes these towers so creepy. This is something that I honestly should have mentioned when I played Sandtrap. If we try to head to the edge of the map marked by these barriers, we start getting a warning. And then, boom. Utterly obliterated, killed by the Guardians, is what it would say. These mysterious guardians that seemingly watch your every move. These things that kill you if you decide to get too creative. I'm glad that I personally never read as much into that as I probably should have, because then I probably would have been too scared to play on my own. But I've read a lot of stories from video game discussions on X, and a lot of people were really unnerved by that thought. Alright everyone, it is currently 3:30 in the morning, several days after I initially recorded this. And I literally just woke up and had an image in my head of a third area to this map. Like, something just told me, like, no, there's a whole, like, cavernous underground to this map. And now that I think about it, that actually kind of sounds right. Like, I'm pretty sure I remember this being advertised as having 3 different areas. But look, this teleport takes us to the upper level. I don't see any other teleports. Like, I have no idea how one would actually do this. You know, this isn't like Gary's mod where we can just no-clip. Yeah, deleting props is kind of annoying, because I have to hold it down, and it's the delete key, so I have to reach across the keyboard to do it. But, like, if we... Hello? Hello? Very, very strange to experience the Bernard's Door phenomenon in Halo 3. But here we are. I mean, it's not entirely unprecedented. Now that I look at this, I do sort of remember it, so it's not entirely a Mandela effect thing, but still, to not have remembered this at all at the time, for all of this to just have been hidden below. Oh, that is so weird. It's actually kind of like having its own little foundry just underneath everything else. Okay, I'm not going to have anything else to say about this since, you know, there's nothing here. Just pointing out that this thing's existence and how I had forgotten about it is so weird all its own. Believe it or not, there was even another DLC pack after the one Sandbox was in, and I don't think I ever actually owned this one. Honestly, I can't remember playing on this at all. I remember seeing screenshots, I remember seeing it at a friend's house, but by this point, I think like Halo Reach might have even been getting ready to come out, and I just never really had the interest. Yeah, see, this I just don't recognize at all. And to me, like, this, like, hardly even looks like Halo 3. Compare this to the maps that the base game shipped with, and, well, it almost looks like a different art style. Which I suppose it actually could have been made by different people, given how much later it was. Yeah, this is actually kind of a strange feeling, because this game was, like, my jam for such a long time. And here I am, actually exploring a map, not having any idea what's where. It almost feels like playing a mod. Sort of feeling I might get playing modded levels in like SWAT 4 or something from the workshop for Gary's mod. But no, this was official. That also means that I'm not really going to have a whole lot to say about it, unfortunately. Ooh, this is kind of cool. From this side, we can extend this bridge, but only kind of. Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. So what that does, it means you can now jump over to here, where before you would have to drop down into what is probably Warthog Alley. Or I guess Ghost Alley in this case. Seems to be a very splatter-focused map. But much like Last Resort, it seems like it's basically creating like a river through the center, while everyone else battles to stay on the islands and maintain control of their islands. So it's at least pretty cool design. It's just weird exploring a map where I've only been here by myself. I've never seen actual gameplay taking place on it, even if I can imagine how that might go. Oh, look out there. I think the other one, Heretic, is a remake of Midship, which was a Halo... Hello? Hello, what are you? What are you? Were you... I've never seen these maps before. Like, didn't even know they existed. Was there another DLC pack, or were these something that would have been added after in the MCC? If this is another DLC pack, then they were way late. Like, so late that I wouldn't have even heard of it. Oh, did these come out in, like, 2015 or something? Okay, Waterfall. Let's have a look at these. Wait. Surprise actual exploration at the end of this here. Oh, it's all frozen. And actually... yeah, this art style, these graphics, it looks so different. This doesn't look like Halo 3 at all. It looks like almost something from Halo 4. Oh, but this is so cool and so pretty to look at. I mean, I'll be honest, I've noticed that this entire game looks a lot more gorgeous in the MCC. I noticed that games after about 2004 or 5 or so all get a big upgrade simply by upping the resolution and frame rate, but this is something else. Whoa. Oh, look, the way the snow blows through. Almost like, oh, look, wait. Oh, we can even see the Hornet flying in the distance. Landing on the pad. This is so cool. How did I miss this? But yeah, you can see the snow billowing through, almost like what would have made Blackout a lot better. There's all these grav lifts taking us to different parts of the structure. Not too big, but it's doing a lot within its space, which is something that Halo was always really, really good at. Look at this. The way the light reflects off of the surfaces surrounding it. Oh, look, there's even an outdoor area with a pelican on a landing pad. Ah, that's been one of the most requested features for a long time, is a pelican in Forge mode. I think we might have finally gotten it with the MCC Reach, but we definitely finally got it with Flight Simulator, which is really strange. Ooh, what is this? Oh, secret passage beneath. Imagine there's a firefight going on down here. Maybe a bunch of players are holding this position, and then you just slide down below and start spraying. The next one is Icebox, and what kind of frozen Blade Runner is this? This doesn't look like anything that was in the game prior. Is this a wall? Yeah. Some kind of structure collapse. It looks like... well, it looks like this is all like the slums of some futuristic city. Actually looks a lot like the city in Halo Reach. But I'm not sure where exactly this is supposed to be. Look, we've got trains running along rail lines. Skyscrapers overhead. Oh, this is so cool. Let's have a look around, and oh, this map is gigantic. We've got vehicles flying actually really, really close by. Look, it's hovering over, projecting its spotlight all over the place. Like some kind of police patrol over the undesirable parts of the city. This has to be an MCC thing, right? Hang on. Yeah. Yeah, it bounces right off. And it flies away like, yep, screw this. We don't get paid enough to police this area. You know, most Halo maps take place in some kind of military facility or alien's craft or forerunner structure. This is the first kind that really feels like street combat. You can imagine all these little things are just little doorways into businesses, poking out and firing at each other as you try and, like, strafe around. This is so different from anything that came before. And, you know, I would think, oh, this is a cool map if it were in Halo 4, but I just can't comprehend that this is Halo 3. It feels like when you have a dream about a game you love, imagining all kinds of new levels and mechanics that when you wake up you know would never actually happen. But here it is. And the last of this mysterious new trio is Edge. And crazy vistas has always been a big part of Halo's appeal, but wow. I'm used to seeing, like, map paintings and things in the distance, but this is something else altogether. It's definitely new to have so much detail, so close, in such high fidelity. But this actually, architecturally, this is reminding me a lot of Construct, which is a map I didn't play in this video. But it seems we're not going to be spending most of our time looking at that gorgeous view. We're going inside, and in here is more or less the kind of construction I've come to expect from a Halo map, but that middle is pretty scary. Oh, look at that, just a pit down to nothing. Ooh. Look at this. I think the description said that this was meant to be some kind of, like, secure remote data storage. All these little work drones flying, buzzing back and forth. The Halo games have always had such an incredible, almost impossible sense of scale. Everything you enter is so huge, something so distinctly alien because humans just don't do things like this. And it's one thing to do that for a campaign where you're trying to be cinematic, but it's something else entirely to put this level of effort and artistry into multiplayer maps where, like I said earlier, most players will never even notice this stuff. We've got the dark and foreboding vibe of these alien constructions for ends beyond our comprehension. And then we turn around right over here to one of the most gorgeous views you'll ever see. All this advanced technology with plant life and growth coming down off of it. It's always done such a good job of having something that's so advanced and futuristic and at the same time feels ancient. Once again, I just can't believe this is the game where I spent so much of my time, at this point, more than half my life ago. A new experience in something so old. Well, I think that's about all I have to say about that. Maybe it's because it's just one of those things that has embedded itself into my brain. But in addition to the sound of distant grenade explosions, a lot of times when I was working on these larger maps, or even smaller ones, I could swear I'd hear the sound of someone using one of the grav lifts somewhere. But yeah, that was a look at some Halo 3 maps. And one Halo 2 map, because I felt like it illustrated my point better. Okay, that was kind of weird. I don't know if that's part of the map ambiance or what, which is actually kind of weird timing, considering I was just about to say that this is more of a trip down memory lane than an actual look at the spookiness inherent in the game. But that's because when it comes to those feelings of loneliness and feelings of being watched, there's not actually a whole lot to say about it. It's just this ever-present, unnerving feeling that these things have. And the more I look into these things, the less I feel like it's tied to nostalgia. While nostalgia certainly does add to the feelings, like, it feels like you're returning to see an old friend that you've honestly neglected and you almost expect to be mad at you. It's not required. I mean, like I said, I felt a little bit freaked out on these maps even at the time. But there is something to be said also for returning to a place that you spent so much time and finding it just a little bit different. Finding it not quite how you remember. To be honest, I'm just glad we had the opportunity to play these games again on PC. I'm glad to see these games actually get new life, because that used to be something that didn't happen. Once a game died out, you couldn't play it anymore. And I'm so happy to be able to play Halo 3, join matchmaking, and get in a game in the modern day. I mean, I have no idea how well populated the matchmaking actually is for this, but at least a couple of years ago when I came back for Reach, I mean, I would get into a game within seconds. And even that game is quite nostalgic, even though it feels, again, anchored in my mind as a new thing compared to Halo 3. But more than anything, what coming back here has highlighted for me is how we tend to tie the media we consume to the period of our lives in which we experienced it, bringing back the associations of all the things we felt at the time. And so when I'm playing Halo 3, I imagine the comfort of coming home from school and hopping on with my friends, being excited to try all the new minigames and maps. And I guess the same can be said for just about anything. Nostalgia for games isn't just about nostalgia for the game itself, but nostalgia for ourselves. And I think that's part of the reason why horror stories persist. It comes from a time when we didn't know what to believe when these stories came around. We're also returning to that part of ourselves that would have placed so much more weight on that feeling that there's something not right here. It's the part of ourselves that would have believed far more willingly that maybe there could be something lurking around. But if you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more creepy and comfy content. If you have any ideas for other videos you think I should do, the best place to suggest that will be at the Discord, which I will link in the description. If you want to try this game out for yourself, that link will also be in the description. If you want to support me on Patreon, that link will be in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next one.